Benny, I said I'm doing it, okay? I'm on it. All right. Hey, thanks for coming by the garage today. My name's Cass. This is the Golgari Graveyard, where I go over old, cheap, and janky deck techs that you probably shouldn't use. Today, we're going to be talking about this little rascal right over here. Greasefang Okiba Boss. This ain't your daddy's EDH deck, though. No, we're not going to be being like little Timmy and just swinging in for combat every turn. We're going to be talking about how to flicker in a fleet of vehicles in and out of the game over and over again and get the most value out of your fleet of vehicles that you possibly can. Okay?
Cass, you better not be printing cards on the world computer again.
Benny, that was one time. Jeez, I'm not, okay?
Get out here and do your job then.
There's no customers, Benny! Okay, I'm sorry about that. Let's go over here and talk about it. First of all, let's go over the star of the show, Greasefang, Obika Boss. She is a 4/3 rat pilot in Orzhov colors. Most of this deck, though, you can get away with building it like mono white because so many of the artifacts that we use are monocolor, and so are many of the flicker effects and the creatures that you're going to be using to crew your vehicles. Greasefang's ability says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, return a vehicle card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste. Return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of your next end step. Now, obviously, this means that we want to run a bunch of vehicles in the deck. Here's a list of all of them. We got a big job ahead of us. All right, you're here. You know how to play Magic: The Gathering. Obviously, you know that we need to run a bunch of vehicles in our deck. Why do you keep asking me about these things? Jeez. However, usually, this frankly ridiculous reanimation effect is curbed by the fact that these vehicles go back into our hand at the beginning of our end step. So how are we going to get around that, huh? Well, you're just going to have to hang on for a minute because we need to go over our mana plan first. Now, we've got 5 of your basic mana rocks in this deck. They're all very aggressively costed at 1 or 2 mana, so don't worry about it. It doesn't matter that you're not playing the best card in Magic: The Gathering for some reason, and so you can't ramp effectively. There is also a Scourge familiar in this deck, which lets you discard a card to generate black mana. Not only does that help you with your ramp plan, it also gets some really pricey vehicles from the top of your deck into your hand where you don't want them into the graveyard where you do want them, so that Greasefang can just pull them up at no cost for you. Act now. It's at the Greasefang's Toyotathon. Come on down. We got vehicles that we're throwing in the fucking garbage over here. Get on over here. You want a Parhelion? We got one. You want an Essika's Chariot? Play green. Alright, now let's go over our discard plan. Which card? This card. Since sacrificing and discarding our vehicles is actually an upside in our deck rather than a downside, we're going to look at some bodies that we can put on the battlefield to help us out with that plan. Seasoned Hollowblade has 3 power, so he does decently well at crewing our vehicles. He also lets us discard a card to give him Indestructible. There's no limit to the amount of times that you can do this. He can be as indestructible as you want. You can give him Indestructible 2 or 3 times during the turn, so if you just have a full grip full of big pricey vehicles, he can get as many of those into your graveyard as you want once you have paid his mana cost just one time. Value. That's what we're about here at Greasefang's used car dealership. Next, in our land base, we have a Gaia Reach Sanitarium, which lets you filter your hand, discarding the big vehicles and drawing more action from it. Also, if you're one of those smooth talking types, you can really sell this as a group hug strategy and get people to not zap it. Not that people run land destruction in Commander anyway, but everyone likes drawing cards, right? Why would they get rid of old Gaia Reach Sanitarium over here? It's helping the whole board state out. Why? They don't want to kill you first. You're just a little rat. You're trying to help everyone out, trying to make your living in this cold, hard world. Now I hear you saying, Cass, this is supposed to be a janky, bad deck that you probably shouldn't use. What are you doing with all of these good, legitimate discard strategies in here? Well, if you would just listen for a sec. No, don't move. His vision's based on movement. It's a Rotting Regisaur. He's right here. This guy is big, and that's always good, as you know. He can crew any vehicle in your deck. He could probably crew 2 or 3 of them if you would let him. Actually, vehicles are really confusing in Magic. So I'm sure that if you're just really confident about it, you can sell it to someone at your table that this guy can crew like 2 or 3 of your vehicles. I bet you could get away with it at least once. He also makes you discard a card at the beginning of your upkeep. That is not a May ability, you have to discard, because he's bigger than you and he told you to. So hang on to those vehicles once you've got your big buddy over here on the battlefield. Alright, so you have some vehicles on the field now. Greasefang lets you give one of them haste so you can attack with it immediately and get some value off of it, but at the end of your turn, she's still hanging that nice glowy wrench over your head being like, okay buddy, let's just take it back to the hand now, nice and slow and nobody gets hurt, alright? And that's when you say psych and you spike that mech suit right into the trash can where she can't get her greasy little paws all over it. The creatures that can help you sacrifice your vehicles are Bloodthrone Vampire, Flesh Eater Imp, and Phyrexian Ghoul. We also have Phyrexia's Core in the mana base as a free sacrifice outlet that you don't even have to pay mana for. You're not going to see a deal like that anywhere other than here at Greasefang's Used Car Emporium. Since vehicles become artifact creatures for the entire turn after they're crewed, all of these sacrifice a creature abilities that work at instant speed are going to be able to throw them into the hole before the end of your turn so that the big boss over here can just pull them back out and attack with them again during your next combat phase. So what are we even doing with all these vehicles in here, huh? They're completely useless hunks of junk unless you got some creatures on the battlefield to crew them up with, right? No, wrong. That's where you'd be wrong, because every single vehicle in our wonderful fleet here at Greasefang's Used Car Emporium has an enter the battlefield effect. So you get value out of it, as well as getting a nice shiny piece of metal to smack your friends in the head with. First of all of these abilities is card draw. We've got a Bombat Bazaar Barge. We've got a Rib Skiff. Both of these draw you a card as they enter the battlefield. Reckoner Bankbuster can repeatedly draw you cards by removing all of these charge counters, and once you do that 3 times, it also gets you a pilot on the battlefield, so it can crew itself, basically. We've also got a Disciple of Bolas and a Deadly Dispute in this deck to help you accomplish the same thing. You kill a vehicle, you draw a card. Great value, only for you. At Greasefang's, we love your used cards! Now on to removal. Night Paladin, Sky Sovereign, and Surge Hacker Mech will all deal damage as they enter the battlefield. Sky Sovereign and Surge Hacker will help you get rid of creatures, and Night Paladin, I think secretly has like the most powerful removal in the game. Not a lot of Commander players know this, so I'm going to clue you in on like a fun little secret. But in the Commander format, if you do 40 damage to someone directly, they are actually eliminated from the game. And when you eliminate a player from the game, this is where it gets tricky. It also gets rid of their entire board state. So, when you think about it, casting Night Paladin 8 times is really better than a Farewell or anything because it gets rid of creatures. It's like a board wipe, removes enchantments, removes planeswalkers. It's just like a fun little tip that I don't think enough Commander players are really clued in on. But I guess if you feel like playing worse removal spells, we also have a Mysterious Limousine, a Rite of Oblivion, and Bone Shards to get rid of creatures, planeswalkers, and enchantments. We also run a couple of board wipes in this deck, but we really want board wipes that get rid of all creatures and then give us a bunch of creatures to crew our vehicles with, because the vehicles are... this deck is slow, alright? I've played it, it's hard. You gotta swing every time. You can barely ever leave up vehicles as blockers. You just need a lot of bodies on the battlefield. Martial Coup and Phyrexian Rebirth will each wipe the board and then make a bunch of 1/1 tokens that can crew vehicles in the case of Martial Coup, or in the case of Phyrexian Rebirth, they'll make one big creature that can just instantly crew whichever vehicle you happen to be throwing in the garbage that game. So that's some good value for you. If you kill enough creatures with Phyrexian Rebirth, you can even make a big enough creature to crew multiple of your vehicles again. Don't try this tactic unless you're a cheater. I mean, a cool loose cannon who doesn't play by the rules. Hi, this is Editing Baycast. I forgot to include White Sun's Twilight into this part of the video. It's also a good addition as a board wipe that gets you bodies. Anyway, thanks for watching. Let's go back to the video now. Mwah. Make sure you board wipe before combat though, because that's when your vehicles are going to be crewed, and you don't want to accidentally throw away all of the good value that you just barely got, along with wiping out all of your opponent's creatures. Just remember, artifacts before they're crewed, creatures after they're crewed, until someone else's turn. You don't want to go accidentally wiping away all of your cool mechs and your sweet rides and your dope pussy wagons and stuff. I can't say that with a straight face. Speaking of getting creatures for us, we don't actually need to play creature spells in this deck at all because we have so many good cards that make creatures for us. Why would you need to crew your vehicles when you play vehicles that come with their own crew, right? And that's why we've got a Thunderhawk gunship, a Parhelion 2, Night Scythe, and Enchanted Carriage, as well as a Clown car in this deck. Yeah, that's right, we clown in this motherfucker. You better take your sensitive ass back to Yu-Gi-Oh!, etc., you get it. All of these have an ETB or an attack trigger that makes multiple creatures for you. That's right, creature and crew. You get a 2-for-1. You get 2-for-1 at the BOGO sale down here at Greasebang's Used Car Emporium. This weekend only, come down Sunday. Bad credit, no credit, I don't give a shit. Having a Castle Ardenvale in our mana base can also get a creature onto the battlefield for the low cost of 4 mana, which happens to be, not many know this, the price of a human soul. Nautiloid Ship runs double duty as graveyard hate, as well as stealing creatures to crew your vehicles from your opponent's graveyards, because reanimating creatures from our own graveyard just isn't enough. I'm the graveyard girl. I'm the one who reanimates things. Another reason we don't need to play creature spells is because some of our vehicles actually crew themselves. Fleetwheel Cruiser has haste and doesn't need to be crewed until the turn after it enters the battlefield. And in our deck, we want to make sure that you don't get a turn 2 with the same vehicle on the battlefield. You want that thing to be in and out of here. It's a new vehicle every turn. Weatherlight Completed becomes a artifact creature permanently after 4 of your creatures die. And if you're being a good little aggro player and full swinging every time, that should happen in no time. Peace Walker Colossus and Dermotaxi can also fire up those engines by paying just 2 mana, or in the case of Dermotaxi, by exiling creatures from your opponent's graveyard. Because you don't get to reanimate, only me! Mechhanger and Armed and Armored can turn on your vehicles for mana, and leave the rest of your board untapped if you need blockers. You're probably going to use Armed and Armored as an alpha strike though, because you're a cool gamer who doesn't block. If you die on the backswing, it just means that you weren't attacking often enough. The most important card to play in any vehicle strategy though is Mech Titan Core. This doesn't animate any of your vehicles or anything like that, but what it does do is exile 5 of them and assemble them into a Megazord. If you're not playing this card in your vehicles deck, then what are you even doing? This is the coolest thing you could possibly do in this dork-ass game, so just throw it in there, why not? So, since our vehicles make creatures for us, we don't actually need to play that many creature spells. But, what if you get board wiped? Then all of your cool vehicles and all of those little tokens that were crewing them for you all get permanently erased, and it's going to take a while to rebuild from that point, unless you have these cards. Imperial Recovery Unit is a vehicle that Greasebang can rescue, and it also brings back a smaller creature or vehicle with it, like Reckoner Bankbuster or Seasoned Hollowblade, like we discussed before. Out of the Tombs, Phyrexian Reclamation, Palace Siege, and Aetheros are all enchantments that continually bring back creatures, so you always have a crew to help you fire those vehicles up. Aetheros also has the upside of stealing creatures from your opponent's side of the battlefield once you get a vehicle that's big enough to start running them over. Footbottom Feast and Mortuary Mire can each grab a specific creature from your graveyard and put it on the top of your library so you get it as your next draw. Gix's Command can also rescue a creature from your graveyard, but it has a bunch of versatile abilities. It can pump up one of your vehicles if you need that extra little oomph to run over one of your opponents. It can also act as an edict to make your opponents sacrifice a creature. Takenuma, of course, is also a great channel land that can pull one of your creatures from the junkyard back into your hand. Oh, wait. Hold on, someone's coming in. Hold on a second.
Huh. I swear I heard it in here. How many times I gotta tell her to quit recording videos on the clock? This customer's been waiting a month for that timing belt. Cass!
Oh my god. Alright, that was close. Oh, that reminds me. We run a bunch of cards with flicker and blink effects that repeatedly bounce our own vehicles in and out of the game, exiling them and returning them to the battlefield, which triggers their enter the battlefield effects over and over again. Most MTG players are familiar with cards like Ephemerate, Cloud Shift, and Acrobatic Maneuver, which can repeat an ETB effect just once. We also run a bunch of creatures that can stick around and give us that flicker effect over and over again. Cards like Eldrazi Displacer, Angel of Condemnation, and Gale Powder Mage. If we get any of these creatures out at the same time as a Ribskiff, for example, we can be drawing an extra card each turn, or if we get one of them out alongside a Knight's Paladin, we can do 10 damage to one of our opponents every single turn. Settle Beyond Reality doubles as a removal spell, and against all odds can also dig something out of our graveyard for us. Kaya, Ghost Assassin, and the Eternal Wanderer can either give us our blink effect on our own vehicles, or it can actually remove one of your opponent's threats for the entire round. They can help you get rid of something until your next turn, so you just don't have to think about it. You probably won't want to be using these quite so often to get rid of your opponent's threats though, because, hold on, let's go back over. Okay, so, Greasefang, right? She wants to get a vehicle from your graveyard at the beginning of combat and then return it to your hand at the beginning of your next end step. So all of these flicker spells that we have will blink things out of the game and then they return to the battlefield and Greasefang doesn't recognize them no more. If you go to combat, get a vehicle from the graveyard, swing in with it, and then play a blink or a flicker spell during your post-combat main phase, Greasefang won't return it back to your hand, and as it blinks back into the battlefield, it'll enter untapped so you can crew and block for the next 3 turns during your opponent's combat steps. With this plan, you can fill your board with as many vehicles as you can discard or sacrifice, so you'll also want to do that at every single opportunity. Making more creature tokens every single turn by blinking in a Parhelion or a Thunderhawk gunship can also overwhelm your opponents really quickly by swinging wide around them. This is especially useful when you have these vehicles that stay on your side of the battlefield and you don't have to keep discarding them every one of your turns in order to get them with Greasefang again. You just keep getting more and more creature tokens, swing wide, swing also with vehicles, and then bada bing, 40 damage easy. Anytime you aren't blinking your vehicles though, you're gonna wanna do it to this guy. Stonehorn Dignitary makes your opponents skip their next combat phase after he enters the battlefield. So our plan here is for you to play fair magic and just swing in and beat people to death and make sure your opponents can't do the same to you. Yeah, that's right, Gruul player. Pretty hard to overrun me when I've got Rocksteady from the Ninja Turtles standing on my side of the battlefield, huh? Isn't that right? Get out of here. Alright, land. To finish it out here, the mana base for this deck is pretty cheap other than the Abandoned Mire. I also put a Castle Lochthwain in here for card draw and a Grim Climb, Bright Climb pathway. This deck is mostly monocolor, like we said up at the top of the video. A lot of colorless. Eldrazi Displacer wants you to have colorless mana, but other than that, you could mostly run basic plains and a couple dual lands. The only reason you might want 1 or 2 basic swamps is to fetch them, but yeah, as long as you're casting Greasefang pretty early, you really don't use a lot of black mana in this deck, and what you do use, you can get from Scourge Familiar. But yeah, I think that should do it for us here. I'll show you out. This deck is around $170 on Architect. It's definitely not too budget, but I got really excited about pulling a Greasefang out of a Neon Dynasty pack, and that's why I started building this deck. I just thought it would be really cool to share that cool little flicker interaction. I got very hyped about it. Please let me know if you've tried anything like this before, any cool little flickery stuff with artifacts or vehicles. I love to hear about it all the time. Thanks for sticking around. It really helps if you comment and subscribe. I'll have the deck list linked through Architect in the description, like always, and I hope you have a beautiful evening.
I knew you.
I'm calling my union rep.
Cass,
One of those will be good enough.